Let's take a look at pre-treating now. Of course, for all of our garments that are going to have a white underbase, they need to be pre-treated first. Before we actually spray the Pretreat product onto the garments, we need to pre-press them. Now when we pre-press them, this drives the moisture out of the garment as well as helps flatten out the fibers. The first thing we want to do is make sure that our heat press is on 340 degrees, which this one is. It's up to temperature. And then we want to make sure that we have a medium to medium heavy pressure on the heat press. So I'm going to check that first, and that's not nearly enough pressure. Now I can place the garment on there. We're going to print on the back of this. I like to make sure that the collar is off the heat press when I do this. And again, not enough pressure, so we're going to adjust the pressure. Still not quite enough. Feel that one more time. And that feels pretty good. That's a nice medium to medium heavy pressure right there. Okay, so now that we're ready, we've got the heat press set up. I'm going to just put a Teflon sheet or a piece of release paper on the surface. And I'm going to press this for approximately 10 to 15 seconds. I'm then going to release the press, remove my sheet, and now we're going to take this over to our automatic Pretreat machine. We're going to open up the drawer. We're going to load the garment. Now you can load this either way. You can put the collar at this end or at the other end. You want to make sure that you tuck it in underneath so that the overspray is not going to go onto the sleeves and the sides. Push the drawer closed. You would then adjust the timer. The lower the number, the more Pretreat. The higher the number, the less Pretreat. We want to be on a dark shirt of cotton, generally between a 2 and a 3. So I'm going to go just a little below the middle. I'm just between 2 and 2.5. This is a fairly lightweight material. The heavier the material, the more it absorbs the liquid. We usually need to apply more Pretreat on a garment like that. Now I'm simply going to hit the start button. I do want to kind of watch. I want to make sure that we get a fairly even spray. Open the tray. And now we'll take it back to the heat press to dry this. Now, here it's critical to have some kind of a sheet on top of this. I didn't actually have to put a sheet on top of it. The only reason I did is because this heat press happens to be a little bit dirty, and I didn't want those fibers to get raised by sticking to the surface of the heat press. We can use two different products. We can either use a standard Teflon sheet, which is reusable for quite a long period of time. You do need to make sure that you wipe it down with some isopropyl alcohol every once in a while to take that tackiness off of there that comes from the Pretreat. It is somewhat sticky. Or we can use release paper. Release paper can be used several times. It can be used until it starts getting wrinkled. Once it starts getting very wrinkled, you want to discard it and get a new piece. The one thing you never want to use for Pretreat is we never want to use parchment paper because it's absorbent. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to place it on the surface, and we want to dry the Pretreat for between 30 and 40 seconds. I'm going to bring this down. At the end, our 30, 40 seconds. We release the heat press, and we will now take this shirt over to our printer where we can print it. Now, these shirts can be printed immediately, or they can be stored for up to a month before we actually print on them. When we do store them, we want to be very careful that we don't disturb the surface fibers. So we want to store them. Usually I would put this down. I would put a piece of release paper or parchment paper on the surface. I would now take the next one and put the Pretreat against the release paper. I would stack them up about a dozen tall, simply fold the stack in half, and then carefully place that into a box or some kind of a plastic container and store them until we're ready to use them. Let's take a look at the rest of the printing process. This is how we manually pre-treat a garment. This is our pre-treat. This is what is loaded inside the front end of our Wagner sprayer. Now we do want to make sure that the little tube inside is pointing towards the front, and the adjustment is done with this adjustment screw here. You want to adjust it so that you're applying an amount of product that you're comfortable with, depending on how fast you want to move. Some people prefer to move very quickly across the garment, so they want it to apply more. And then other people like to go real slow. They feel they have more control that way, so you would want less product to come out. I'm going to move it more of a medium speed so the gun is adjusted for me for that. I'm now going to take my pre-pressed shirt. I'm going to set it down up here. And when we do pre-treat, we do want to make sure that we don't stop at the edges, that we continue past. We want to make sure that we maintain an equal distance from the surface of the garment. And I like to go both horizontally and vertically when we spray it. So, we always want to prime the gun off from the garment first, then I like to keep the motor running and apply my product. We will now take this over to our heat press and dry the pre-treat. We are now going to load our pre-treated garment onto our platen. We are printing the back of this shirt, which is the pre-treated side. Okay, the surface is nice and flat, not stretched, nothing sticking up. Slowly push it in. Using the bed up button, hold the up till it stops. We want to scan the whole shirt, so we're going to slowly push it in. Okay, it didn't change height, so everything is fine on that. Slowly pull it out. Now, this is going to be a multi-layer print, so I'm going to go to the other side of the machine. I'm going to press the layer function button, make sure it has the blue light on, and now we're going to hit load and load the platen into the machine. We'll now go over to our software and bring in the file that we're going to print.
Now let's take a look at the computer side of printing a colored shirt, or in this particular example, a black shirt. The first thing we're going to do in the ripping software is pick what type of garment that we're printing on. In this case, I'm printing on a black shirt. The next thing I'm going to do is come down to the bottom here and pick the type of template that I'm using, my media. In this case, I'm doing a single shirt, but I'm going to do it, of course, as a 2-up because it's a full front or a full back. So that is the 2-up configuration of your platens. Then I'm going to bring in my design. So I'm going to come up here to Open, click on it, find the file that I wish to print. Now when I open it, it's going to come up on the preview screen. Once it's on the preview screen, we click on the image, and that allows us to rotate the design if necessary. Now in this case that's not necessary because I'm doing a standard front or back print. My collar would be over here, and this would be the part of the platen that would be away from the machine, and this would be the part of the platen that's in the machine. So now I'm going to rescale this. I'm going to make the width of this 10 inches wide, and I'm going to place the image to start 3 inches down from the collar. My collar is right here, so I'm going to come to this dimension and make it 3. Enter. So now I've changed my size and placement. Now at this point in time I can print it, and there are a couple different ways I can print it. I can come right up here and print it, or I can right mouse on it and hit print. I prefer to process the file first, which is called spooling or ripping. The RIP stands for a raster image processing. So I'm going to hit RIP only. I could also have gone up here to the spool feature. It will now process the file. You'll notice the status is inactive. It's going to change to holding job spooled once it's completed. At this point in time now, I can either click on this and hit print. I could also, if I'm going to do multiples, which of course if I'm only loading one, I'm not, but I could put a count in here as to how many runs I want to do. I could hit print down here, or I can just right mouse and tell it to print the file.
So now we just hit print to release the print to the printer. The printer is going to print the white underbase layer first. It's going to automatically rewind since we pressed the layer button, and then it's going to print the color layer on top of that. Now as the white comes out of the machine, you actually want to look at this. Excuse me, this tells us a lot about the quality of the print that we should get out of this. What we want to see in the white is we want to see the white without any little fiber sticking up through it. We want to see a really solid white. We want it to be shiny, and we want it to be very smooth looking. Notice it automatically gets taken back into the machine because we have selected the fact that it is a multi-layer print. Take a look at how beautiful and vibrant those colors are. We're now going to unload this and we will bring it over to our heat press. When we unload it, we like to always unload it the opposite way of the way we loaded it. So we want to unload the sides first, then the bottom, then the top, so we can grab a hold of the shoulders and bring it right over to our heat press. Now when we set this on the heat press, we want to make sure that the collar is off. And we like to hover. If your heat press has a hovering feature, we do prefer to do that. This particular heat press does have a hover. You're going to hover anywhere from about 30 to 40 seconds. So I'm going to bring the heat press down just until the magnet catches. And I'm going to let it hover with nothing covering the print. We are, of course, at 340 degrees on our heat press. And when we do press this, we want the heat press to just make contact with the surface of the garment. Unlike when we pre-press or pre-treat, where we want that medium to medium heavy pressure, here we don't want that. So our time is up for the hovering. We're now going to take a piece of release paper, parchment paper, or a Teflon sheet, and we're going to cover up the print, being careful not to smear it. And now we are going to bring the heat press all the way down, and this will now dry for 3 minutes with the heat press just in contact with the garment. We're in our last 10 seconds. At the end of our 3 minutes of drying, we now have a beautiful finished print.